Good evening. Hopefully, everybody's Saturday is treating them well. No sooner had all these robins arrived that we're supposed to get a few inches of snow tonight, so pretty typical sort of spring event. Just a few notes about our worship time together tomorrow, given that we have a stay at home order. Our worship leaders have made the wise decision to stay at home and not come in and record. And so we'll be having worship from my home, kind of like this, but with some song, scripture, sermon, and prayer together. And so you can tune in tomorrow to Facebook Live at 10 o'clock. Shortly thereafter, the video will be uploaded onto our church YouTube channel. If you're on our church email list, this information was just sent out to you in the past few minutes. Just a further note as well, if you have some extra groceries or anything around the house that you would like to donate, Bob and Julie Larson Williams would like to come by and pick it up and bring it over to Chum because there's a great need for that. So please consider doing that. Going to continue reading from Knowing Jesus by James Allison, this wonderful chapter called The Intelligence of the Victim. And I'll begin reading a little bit where I left off last time, and then I'll end with a song. If you have a hymnal at home, it'll be helpful tomorrow for some of the songs that we use in worship. But it'll be helpful now if you'd like to sing along to song 338, Beneath the Cross of Jesus. Speaking of this man a victim, apparently in ignorance and done to please God, Jesus had been judged a blasphemer, was in fact the condition which made it possible for God to be revealed for what God really is, the forgiving victim. This is the great irony present in all the Gospels, and particularly in Luke and Acts, that by killing the Messiah, Israel was, without being aware of it, offering up the sacrifice of all sacrifices to God, the sacrifice that could become the basis for their salvation. It is interesting to see how this understanding, the perception, or what I have called the intelligence of the victim, is slowly read back into the living memory of those who had been with Jesus and who had preserved his sayings, whether by memory or by writing them down. For all the Gospels show the life of Jesus leading up to the Passion. It is not as though he lived his life and then by mistake got involved in an imbroglio in Jerusalem and got killed. From the vantage point of the resurrection, the presence of the forgiving victim, the disciples could see that the whole drift of Jesus' life had been towards the Passion. Now please note what I am not saying here. I'm not saying that as a result of the resurrection, the disciples invented a whole set of stories about Jesus as their way of explaining the resurrection. The texts manifestly are not about the disciples' new self-understanding, even though they do reveal that the disciples did now understand things anew. The Gospels all bear witness to Jesus himself having understood all this from the beginning. That is precisely what the disciples did not understand before Jesus' death and did not understand after his resurrection. They all bear witness to the fact that, unlike themselves, Jesus had what I have called the intelligence of the victim from the beginning. There are certain obvious pieces of evidence for this, such as the way in which Jesus prophesies his own forthcoming death to his disciples. Passages like from Mark 9, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, the Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed after 3 days, he will rise. But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to ask him. These passages make explicit that Jesus knew where he was going and what was to happen. They bear witness to the fact that the intelligence of the victim was not simply a post-resurrection understanding, but one which Jesus had all along. Jesus' understanding had probably been nourished by the texts of the Old Testament as well. It is probable that he based his understanding of the resurrection, and indeed his hope in it, on the text of Hosea 6, verses 1 and 2, which was to be so important to the disciples after the resurrection. Come, let us return to the Lord, for the Lord has torn that the Lord may heal us. The Lord has stricken, and the Lord will bind us up. After 2 days the Lord will revive us. On the 3rd day the Lord will raise us up, that we may live before the Lord. The texts bear witness to Jesus having had a profound and original new understanding of the sacred texts of Judaism before his execution. These texts accompanied his acting in ways that he knew would result in his being killed. The texts also bear witness to his teaching his disciples about this, and their not understanding it. This is terribly important, since it means that what I have called the intelligence of the victim is not only a post-resurrection intelligence, it was a pre-resurrection intelligence in Jesus alone, not understood at all by the disciples, and at one stage actively impeded by Peter. See the famous "Get thee behind me, Satan" passage. What did happen at the resurrection was that precisely the intelligence of Scripture and of the relationship between God and victim that Jesus had beforehand came also to be held by the disciples, such that they could understand what they hadn't been able to before. I ask you to consider how completely unique this is. If you or I take part in a historical event, let us say the lynching at Ceausescu, thereafter the story we tell is the sort, Ceausescu, my part in his downfall. We tell what we did or didn't do, whether we were right to do so or not, how we would have acted if such and such, what we would have said to Ceausescu on the way to the firing squad, what Mrs. Ceausescu said to our mate when he picked up her handbag. The story would be the story of our involvement in the passion of Nicolae and Elena, not the story of the inner understanding of what was going on from the point of view of the victims of the lynch. We might speculate on what they felt like, on how they attempted to relate the last tumultuous hours of their lives at the previous 60 or 70 years. However, the whole pattern of their lives, supposing that there was a clear one, would not have been manifest to us at all. Yet that is the story the disciples are telling. The story of the lynch from the point of view of the victim's own understanding of what was going on before it happened, up to and during it. That is to say, they, the disciples, are not in the center of the story. The victim is, and it is the victim's intelligence that is allowed to provide the lines which make the story what it is. Now that is something of what I mean by the intelligence of the victim. However, to stop there would only be half the story, or rather less than half. It would suggest that what we have is a story of a unique individual who had a special sort of knowledge about how he was going to be killed, who lived it out, and afterwards his disciples understood it all, thanks to his resurrection. That would make of Jesus a special man, a magic figure with an arcane knowledge, the intelligence of the victim that a select group of initiates can later get a hold of. What makes the intelligence of the victim which the disciples received as a result of the resurrection even more remarkable was that it did not only yield them information about Jesus and his self-awareness, it revealed to them the fullness of the drift of what he had been teaching them while they were with him. What Jesus had been teaching was perfectly plain and public, and yet it was as though they had a veil over their understanding and were unable to grasp what it was about. That is to say that all along there was nothing arcane or occult about the intelligence of the victim. Jesus had been trying to make it as plain as day. The drama was that Jesus was revealing something about which human knowledge is always shrouded in self-deception. Something, if you like, which goes beyond the roots of what makes us aware. The only way I think I can explain this is with reference to personal experience. I hope that we have all had the experience of gradually coming to perceive exactly the same things in a different way. We look out at a certain reality at home, at work, in a relationship, and realize that without our having understood a particular fact or circumstance that we didn't before, nevertheless, we are aware that our whole way of looking has changed profoundly and subtly. This might be for any number of reasons, like a new friendship, or the end of a period of anxiety where we hadn't realized how much we'd allowed it to color our vision. The point is that the change is not in our conscious awareness, but in the background to that, in what makes us have a conscious awareness at all. It is as though we are watching a film. A film doesn't change, but the projectionist subtly puts a filter into the projector, so that exactly the same film comes out, but is changed into sepia or sync or whatever. The point of my bringing this out is that the disciples' block to understanding the intelligence of the victim was at this level. It was not a question of stupidity, of not grasping basic teachings. The problem was for them, and is for us, that the intelligence that was in Jesus was an intelligence at the level of what makes us conscious, what makes us aware. The disciples had, as we have, a background understanding, which was actually formed by what Jesus was trying to change. The filter, if you like, which colors our perception without our being aware of it, not only is not the same as Jesus' intelligence of the victim, but is in fact its reverse. Our programming, if you like, forms us in rivalry and the techniques of survival by exclusion. Beneath the cross of Jesus, I long to take my stand. The shadow of a mighty rock within a weary land, a home within a wilderness, a rest upon the way from the burning of the noontide heat and burdens of the day. Upon the cross of Jesus, my eye at times can see the very dying form of one who suffered there for me. And from my contrite heart with tears to wonders I confess the wonder of his glorious love and my unworthiness. I take across your shadow for my abiding place. I ask no other sunshine than the sunshine of his face, content to let the world go by, to know no gain nor loss, my sinful self, my only shame, my glory, all the cross. Good night.